Today, I want to talk to you about what's called heart bottom syndrome. This was coined by Paul Chek. You can actually read about it in his book, How to Aim and Be Healthy, on page 163. But it was actually developed, or I shouldn't say developed, it was actually found out about, assessed through a guy out of Prague. His name is Karol Witt. He was a physical therapist. I think he's like 92 or 93, and he's still practicing. And he showed, Paul Chek coined the term heart bottom syndrome, but he showed that through a process of what's called irradiation. So you can actually see this process. It's kind of like when little kids have to go to the bathroom. What do? They squeeze their butt, and they're trying to create neurological overflow through the butt to the colon to shut the colon down, or I should say to contract the colon because it's relaxed. So they try to get that neurological overflow from the glutes to the colon to contract it. Same thing here. If you grab your arm and you squeeze with this arm, well, I'm not squeezing that much, so I don't feel anything in the shoulder. Well, the harder I squeeze, the more neurological overflow I get up my arm, and the more recruitment I get more proximally up the kinetic chain. So the harder I squeeze, the more irradiation and neurological overflow I get. So he showed that when women, or I should say anyone, has a dysfunctional core inner unit, which is the pelvic floor, typically the TVA, internal oblique, external oblique, multifidus, transverse abdominis. I don't think I missed any. But that's your core. So when any of that is dysfunctional, it can be dysfunctional from a gut dysfunction, from leaky gut syndrome, from visceroptosis, which is organs hanging down. It can be dysfunctional, which is very common in women. This is why a lot of women will have a flat ass and a pooch belly below the belly button. It says anytime a female has an episiotomy, you basically cut through the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is actually in the same neurological loop by the transverse abdominis. If the transverse abdominis isn't working, the pelvic floor is not going to work. If the pelvic floor is not going to work, transverse abdominis isn't going to work. So when they cut through the pelvic floor and you develop scar tissue, you basically shut down that neurological input and that neurological loop. So what happens is everything below the belly button, because neurologically you actually have upper and lower abdominals, but not physically. So neurologically, everything below the belly button is innervated by what's called the ilioinguinal and iliohypogastric nerves. So when they cut through the pelvic floor, you actually shut down the neurological loop. So you actually see the lower abdominals become inhibited, and you actually start to see distension in the lower abdominals, or everything from the belly button down. And this is why you see women with their pooch belly. You can do all the dieting you want. You can do all the exercise you want, all external exercise with curls and lunges and all that. You are not going to get rid of this pooch belly. The goal is to actually strengthen the area. So what happens is anytime this area shuts down, or you have the episiotomy, you have gut problems, you have a postural distortion, on and on and on. What happens is, because the pelvic floor actually becomes inhibited, the body still wants to stabilize, because stability always precedes mobility. That's how we move. That's how infants develop. Mobility cannot precede stability. If mobility precedes stability, that's when we have injury. That's why almost everyone you look at today has injury, because everyone's focusing on how much weight they can lift, how fast they can do it, and how many crazy exercises they can do. So stability precedes mobility. So the pelvis needs to be stabilized. There's a lot of joints in there. So what happens is the body says, hey, I have an instability. The pelvic floor is not working. What can I do to strengthen this, or this structure of these joints? So what it does is subconsciously, you actually start contracting your glutes. Your glutes are 80% phasic, which are fast twitch movement, 20% tonic, which is postural. Those 20% actually attach to the coccyx and the pelvic floor. So what your body does is go, wow, I can actually pull in the 20% of these fibers, get the glutes to contract, try to basically create the false illusion that I'm creating stability. And now what happens that 80% of those phasic, fast twitch, global movement fibers that you used to have, right? Glutes are basically movement muscles. Because you're constantly contracting them, you're over-recruiting them, they actually start to atrophy, become very hypertonic, and you actually change most of your glute from being a predominantly fast twitch muscle fiber to a predominantly slow twitch. And that's why you see these people with a flat ass, because the muscle is atrophied, it's become hypertonic, or too much tonicity in it, and they've changed the muscle fiber type over time to basically tonic to phasic, global movement to more stability. So you've created that basically false stability, and that happens through the process of irradiation. So how do we get rid of this? Well, it really depends on the person and what's going on. It could be poor posture. It could be from moving improperly, working out improperly, never having program design, eating crap foods, having a gut dysfunction, having liver inflammation, having constipation, being dehydrated, having leaky gut, parasite, fungal, bacterial infection, episiotomy, a C-section, surgery, on and on and on and on and on. The goal is to not stretch these muscles, because if you stretch the hamstrings and glutes, which are hypotonic, you're actually stretching the very thing that's holding these people together. So now you're seeing a tightness in someone because of a weakness. You actually want to clear up the gut and focus on all the nutrition and lifestyle principles that we always talk about on many of our YouTube clips. You can go to our website at eastwesthealing.com and go to the articles page and check out a lot of our articles on that. I don't have time to go into all these HLC principles. The bottom line is you want to strengthen the inner unit and create intrinsic stability. That doesn't mean always doing exercises on the ground. And that doesn't mean doing crazy exercises. Everyone said, oh, you're working your core doing this crazy tornado ball exercise. Well, I get news for you. The second you move your limbs, 30 to 110 milliseconds before you move your limbs from getting out of bed, your core turns on. So you're always using it. So it's picking the right exercises through assessment to actually activate and isolate the core, and then you integrate it with other movement exercises because you're so dysfunctional. So stay tuned, because I'm actually going to go through some of these exercises. I can't make them person specific, but I'm going to show you in the future that if you do have heart bottom syndrome, which is basically, they call it heart bottom because your butt should be nice and perky. And when it's not, and it's not perky, and it looks like a heart, and it's nice, it's saggy and atrophied, it's called heart bottom syndrome. You can tell the health of someone's pelvic floor and their core by their ass. So stay tuned, because I'll go over some of these, and I'll teach you some of these basic exercises. But the bottom line is, if you have a flat ass or a pooch belly, your pelvic floor is not working, and you have heart bottom syndrome.